is one of the best science fiction series, period.
Doing those murder workouts.
Hippy-dippy, but interesting.
You choose your superpower.
Interesting.
Right.
Right.
That sounded weird.
Turbo Cybrid.
Hashtag Stagnaceous.
Kill everybody, they do.
That's hijinks.
Cypenus.
Banana Fan and Fofani.
Boot full of piss sells for $15.
This week's episode brought to you by the Shrike Workout.
Broadcasting live from inside the power band, deep in our underground bunker located on the island of Valverde. This is The Blah. In this episode, everybody dies. I'm your host, Mulvey, along with my super friends, Dar Higo,
Hello.
and C-Lab Forever.
What's up?
Sup?
What is up?
Folks, welcome to the show. This week, we're going to be wrapping up the final book in our book series, and that would be The Rise of Endymion, which is the final book in the Hyperion Cantos series from Dan Simmons. As we've mentioned before, Dan is the brother of Richard and Gene Simmons. And this, in our opinion, is one of the best science fiction series, period, out there.
Ever.
And is still in 2020. I'm blown away. It's still relevant today. A lot of the concepts, science fiction concepts that he's come up with in these stories, I would say were ahead of their time, predicted a few things, and they still hold up well.
Yeah, I'd say it's almost a little bit too relevant these days. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, I agreed. So let's start off with a quick synopsis of the story. We know that most of you have not read or listened to the books, and that's fine. As you may or may not recall, Aenia is the hybrid child of Braun Lamia from the first story, who is a human, and the cybrid reconstruction of John Keats, also from the first story. And thus, so she has different and special abilities and properties of being half from the core and half from the human world. And her companion is, and the book's namesake, Rahl Endymion, was pulled from the world of Hyperion by Martin Silenus to protect and accompany to protect and accompany Aenia on her journey. In this story, we start off on Earth with Aenia doing her apprenticeship with Frank Lloyd Wright in Arizona, and Rahl ends up leaving from there on the Mississippi River to go and find the ship. He transits through a number of worlds, has some interesting adventures, and ends up finding the ship and then taking a very long journey to meet Aenia, who has herself traveled through many different worlds doing architectural projects and having discussion groups, teaching people about philosophy, religion, and they end up meeting on the world of Taishan, which is a interesting mountainous world, very sort of, I guess you could say, Tibetan as an analog. And of course, throughout the course of the story, they're being chased down by the ever-present Pax, and in particular, the four sibling clone turbo cybrids, Nemes and her three siblings.
Essentially T-1000 style Terminators or something of that ilk.
Yeah, they are very similar to T-1000 Terminators. And the book wraps up all of the threads from the four-book series quite nicely. A lot goes on at the end. A lot of very interesting philosophical and spiritual concepts in this book. And that's about it. So we might as well start on Old Earth, where the story starts.
Cool.
Without play-by-playing this book, I think it was super interesting to me that the quote, lions, tigers, and bears, which are the, sort of other entities that are clearly more powerful, more evolved, they are the ones that have sort of spirited away Old Earth, which is now in the Magellanic Cloud, many, many, many light years away from our solar system. They're conducting all of these, quote, experiments, and they have people, actual people, that presumably they've sort of brought back to life or recreated, and they're doing various different experiments all over the planet. And Aenia is, like I said, at Taliesin West in Arizona training in architecture from Lloyd Wright. She sort of defaults her way to becoming the leader of the group there as she starts her discussion groups about spirituality and philosophy and that sort of thing, evolution. I just found the concept cool of the Earth having, and these lions and tigers and bears having all these different experiments going on all over the planet, and why and what do they mean, and what does it mean for her to be there training as an architecture student?
Yeah. I always found the architecture stuff interesting, but a little confusing. Like I mentioned a couple of times in our other episodes on this series, how much I think Dan Simmons kind of kitchen sinks and throws a variety of his interests at his fictional works. But the architectural stuff is, I'm super interested in architecture. I thought of becoming an architect for a while. So I found it interesting, but I don't really understand the purpose. Even towards the end where it's like she's helping rebuild temples and stuff. Like it's maybe just an attempt at her maturing as a human, considering she's a hybrid.
I think it's literally just a nod to Jesus.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Jesus was a carpenter. Ania was an architect.
That's a very, very good point.
My best stab at it is that it's just something that she wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like the character Ania has to do certain things, but it seems like she scrolls away a couple spaces in her life to do things that she's actually interested in as a person. So that was my best guess at it, was that it was just really there for her to be a nod to Jesus and for her to, have an interest in something that's hers that she enjoys.
Have some will of her own.
That has nothing to do with all of the heady bullshit that's to come.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I feel like the broader non-Ania component of the architecture stuff, like the Lloyd Wright Cybrid stuff, and the John Keats Cybrid stuff, and presumably a bunch of others, because they kind of mentioned there's other experiments going on. I kind of didn't recall that it was the non-human and non-human derived AI entities like the lions and tigers and bears that were doing the experimentation. I kind of thought I thought the experimentation was a, quote unquote good faction of the AIs, but regardless, I kind of feel like the baddies in this are utilizing the cruciform and the deaths, which gets, kind of revealed later, where when a human dies, there's like a spurt of creativity in the neural structure of the brain, and that's kind of similar to the Farcasters being able to be utilized as a computer system, which is super interesting, but obviously very exploitative of the humans. And I kind of got the vibe that the research into, the Lloyd Wright hybrids of the old Earth experiments were similarly kind of trying to understand human creativity, and like the architectural stuff is in that space. But I definitely, in terms of Ania, I think I'm on Benny's motorcycle. But I enjoyed the kind of exploration of the creativity stuff and felt like it might slot in there somewhat.
Yeah, I like that.
I guess I never thought about it really until right now, but like it's almost a study of the true original purpose of Christ versus the bureaucratic bullshit that came out of the church's structure, which a lot of other books have tackled, like Dune tackled it as well. But, Ania and the purity of her message and trying to bring humanity to its best and brightest and beyond its, current evolutionary abilities is like a pure form of Ania as Christ, whereas the entire pack's structure is just the bureaucratic bullshit. So in a way, it's kind of turned into, the New Testament versus the Old Testament or something like that,
She goes as far as to say that, like, Jesus is, Mach 1 of what she is. But for whatever reason, it couldn't get a foothold. It didn't take off. In terms of, not in terms of a philosophy, but in terms of, the literal virus sense of eat of my body, drink of my blood, that whole thing. So those that were there at the Last Supper theoretically had the power to farcast, etc. But they just didn't know how.
Right.
That's how I remembered it as well.
Right.
And yeah, he wasn't around long enough to witness it or kind of help them take those first few steps.
Or spread it at large through the population. It never really got further than his apostles.
Exactly.
But the bureaucracy did, and maybe that kind of threads back to the whole distant thousands of years in the future, whatever, Ania versus Ania as, Neo Christ, not a Matrix reference, therefore not a Matrix death, and the Pax.
But wouldn't this, by virtue of you mentioning that's not a Matrix death, be a Matrix death?
If you want. So I guess like it is one of the key components of the
Much
early
like Neo, he just says no and the bullets stop coming.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that was.
Yeah, definitely.
No.
So the early part that we're talking about is a little bit heady, but it's an important way to set things up and maybe to kind of push things along a little bit. It was interesting the way they constructed that, Ania talking to her, for lack of a better term, congregation, and then Ania being like, yeah, now we all got to get out of here. Everyone's got to fuck off. We're going to go back into the packs, and everyone's kind of freaking out. And then, she tells Raleigh he's got to go first, and he's like super pissed. Like the whole series of the second two books being, from Rawls' storytelling perspective and kind of getting back onto that, Huckleberry Finn style multi-planet thing. I thought it was a good way to kind of kick the story into gear after covering some of that heady stuff early on.
Agree.
It also picks up where it left off.
Yeah, for sure. But maybe as the reader, you're getting a chance to kind of get brought back up to speed, and you kind of, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of empathized with Raw, where it's just kind of like, okay, cool, like the gang's back together, and then he's immediately sent off on his own. He's like super pissed about it.
Oh, there's one thing I carried through this whole book. I just kept thinking to myself, if I was Raw, I would have fucking punched her.
Exactly. Just for like, God damn it.
I was so exhausted with all of her, manipulation and not telling him what the fuck is going on. And, I guess there's a purpose to it, and I'll give Ania the excuse of she has a lot on her mind and a lot to do. So maybe she's not dealing with it the best way she possibly could. But, poor Rawl just gets fucking put through the ringer over and over again.
I agree. But Ben, don't you think that her knowledge of the future, first...
But she herself continually says that she doesn't really know what's going to happen. She has impressions, and I don't know, and the character Anoia fucking pissed me off on this read.
Fair enough.
I don't know what else to say.
Wow.
I found myself very frustrated with everything going on around Ania.
Yeah, fair enough. I did catch like her specifically talking to him before he jumps in the canoe on the Mississippi, where he's pissed and she's like, look, man, I'm worried that if I talk to you about stuff, it'll change what happens. And I'm already...
Exactly.
She doesn't specifically say this, but as the reader, you pick up on that she's kind of saying, like, we already aren't going to get much of a fucking relationship here, dude. So I really want to make sure I don't fuck that up too. But, like, she can't say it to him. So I definitely felt the frustration like you did, though. No doubt.
I definitely felt it. I didn't get as pissed at her. I think that, having that kind of knowledge of the future... in the sense of like not revealing it so it doesn't change the quantum reality, like that I can totally understand.
Whether it could change it or not, notwithstanding. But yeah, who fucking knows?
It could potentially change it.
Maybe.
That's...
Who knows? It's not worth going down that rabbit hole. Watch devs.
Okay, so I thought that was at the beginning, but it was when he dreams... later, right? When he has the kidney stone on Vitus Gray, and then he starts having the conversations with her in, quote, the fever dreams or the dreams, a lot of those conversations happen, or he's remembering conversations that happened at Taliesin.
Right.
And we've already touched on it, but the one that I made a note of was the one where she's talking about biology and diversity and, hyperdiversity. And how on all of these planets that they've gone to, they've introduced basically the same species of insects and birds and all of these animals everywhere. And how it's stagnating, or it's stagnaceous rather. And how spirituality as well has to evolve. And how evolution in and of itself has to evolve. And that I found was... almost one of the more, maybe the most interesting concept in this particular book, if not in the overarching story. Any thoughts about that?
Penny?
The evolution ideas, I don't know that I found to be quite so compelling personally. maybe you can clarify what you found to be captivating about them.
Yeah, what I mean is that she also goes on to say when they read the tablet, right? They're climbing the stairs, okay? And they read the tablet, and it's in Chinese and, old web English. And she starts talking about how everything's just been recreated and how it's like it's a stagnation, how we're always trying to recreate the past, recreate what we had. All of these places, these worlds in the Pax, the hegemony, they're all recreations of ways of life and areas of Earth, and it's like it's antithetical to evolution. People are essentially still doing the same thing. So it's really a conversation about stagnation versus evolution.
Mm. And the Pax and the immortality of the cruciform is a major example of it. Yeah,
It's exactly right. So the Pax is just completely stalled and stagnant. You know what I mean? And really, we come to find out, because we finally find out what the void which binds is and what the cruciforms are. We come to find out that really over the last couple of 100 years, the Pax has just ground evolution in any form to a complete and total standstill, really, with the quote, miracle and sacrament of the resurrection.
Mm.
And that's really just to, the resurrection is the bone that the core through them so that they can use, human neurons and synapses in their computing projects when the humans die via resurrection.
So it's not necessarily the end of evolution. It's just the end of human evolution, because the core is just like doesn't give a shit about human evolution. They just want to utilize us as batteries.
Well, I don't like using the word end, because that's why I said stagnation, because it's ground to a halt. That doesn't mean that it's not going to happen again. It just means that, that it's stagnating. That, and the fact that, taking a world like Taishan, where it has very little Pax presence at all and Pax influence in any of that, it's like they're doing the same exact thing. I mean, it's like mountains and cliffs and bamboo and Buddhism and, all of these things that have been done and were done for hundreds of years on old Earth. It's like a recreation. And does the recreation, instead of moving forward and evolving, that recreation is a way of sort of stagnating everything, or stagnation is a byproduct of that. Does that explain it better, Ben, what I'm talking about?
No, I understand what you're talking about. I was just more interested in a specific kind of, example. I understand what you're saying about that. I just don't. I guess one thing that bothers me about this is I don't like the idea that that's what we'd be doing that far flung into the future, that we would be doing the same things, that an organization like the Catholic Church would have such a stranglehold. There are examples of what I think it would actually be like, and that's something more like ouster culture,
Yeah.
And that is evolution. So I get it, but I don't know that I find it particularly compelling, I guess. I'm not captivated by it.
Yeah, it's definitely not the normal sci-fi exploration. It's kind of like a recreation of the Dark Ages and the Inquisition and kind of historical landmarks.
Yeah.
Which is very fitting for Simmons. It's definitely kind of his shtick between this and the Ilium books or Olympus or whatever.
Yeah, but that was the answer I was looking for. It was like,
okay, good.
It was exactly that. I get it. I feel the same way. That's what I'm asking you, is how does this make you feel? And the answer is, like you said, it's like, that's how it resonates to me as well. Like, it's upsetting to me. And I said this in the Fall of Hyperion story episode, was that, here we are, all these hundreds, thousands of years in the future, and it's like everybody has all these cool tech toys, and it's really just about everybody being more of a lazy, stagnacious douchebag than they are today, literally. And the ousters, are really the true sort of embodiment of that evolution. And then you got the church is just like, oh no, this is an abomination, blah, blah, blah. We got to kill everybody.
Yeah.
And kill everybody, they do.
They certainly do. I just want to, for the record, take an ejection death because I really enjoy the Kev creation of Stagnaceous, which for the first time in my life, I've typed something into Google and only got 2 results back.
What?
I typed the word.
Are you serious?
I typed the word Stagnaceous into Google, and there's literally only 2 things on the page. So there's 2 things in the entirety of humanity that has the word stagnaceous in it, and I really enjoy that.
Can you expound on that a little bit more? That's not an actual word? Because this time I actually thought that was a word.
No, yeah, that's the best. That's why I love the Kev words, is they are so plausible, but it is not a word, and even Google can only find 2 examples in the entire history of mankind where it's been written down, and I like that.
What would you call that? Speculative wordcraft?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I mean, you've come up with some great ones. You know, the sequelogy is one of your recent greats.
Yeah, that is pretty great.
The other one, the one from the void was even better. I can't remember what the hell it was. There's a couple of them. God, I'd give anything to remember what that one was.
Becoming a thing. Watch out. People are going to start expecting it from you.
That's it.
Yeah, I know. I didn't. I thought that was real. That was a real word. And just to compare and contrast, I just went on. I use Edge, right? So I'm on Bing as the default. I didn't get any. There's nothing on Stagnaceous. It defaulted to a different word, which is sagacious.
There you go.
Having or showing keen mental discernment and good judgment. Which is sort of ironic. It's funny, man.
Sorry for the derailment, and I'm happily going to take an ejection death for that, but that was funny.
This does not apply to this podcast, Sagacious.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And ejection death you have.
Can I ask for a very light cul-de-sac to ask a question to Benny, and to you, Kev, too, to see if... I'd like to compare and contrast for a moment, because I think we talked a little bit about the...
Crudidity.
There you go. Crudidity.
That was the one from Idiocracy.
That's a master stroke right there.
That was a good one, dude. I just love it. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Idiocracy or The Void, one of the two. Anyway, sorry, Chad.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I wanted to just kind of feel this out for a moment. That sounded weird. I just wanted to kind of like throw this out there, because I believe we mentioned the kind of Dune story in at least one of these episodes, and the whole, like, you know, dozens if not hundreds if not thousands of planet style world building, and a Jesus figure that can kind of see the future, and, you know, Leto's golden path from God Emperor of Dune. It has a very similar forcing of evolution kind of vibe, and I'm just curious, A, if you agree that there's a similar vibe, Benny, and B, if that is more interesting than this, in the sense that this wasn't particularly interesting, the evolutionary aspect of it. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
Honestly, you know, you might as well throw like Stranger in a Strange Land in there too.
Sure.
That's I guess why I don't find it particularly compelling. I find it compelling. I found it compelling. I think that this book series is very well worth reading. It's very well done, and it's excellent fiction. It's just that I've read this story before, you know, and I've read it in numerous places, and I just don't. It's just, you know, it was a little bit of a slog for me to get through it this time, and it didn't resonate with me again and again. You know, I don't think it's lesser than, you know, other works of fiction that have tackled similar subject matter. It's the subject matter itself I find to be, you know, in Dan Simmons' world, right? In this world that he's created, I've given one example where, you know, evolution is at work, and that's the ouster culture, and I think that's really cool. And, you know, it's where he decided to go with the story. You know, I mean, you could imagine where the cruciform was a beneficial, you know, symbiotic relationship with humanity, which allowed them to live longer lives and, you know, discover more about the universe, instead of being this like thing that's controlled by the church and this nefarious, you know, evil machine, you know, overlord kind of, you know, didn't have to pan out that way. Yeah. Could have been, you know, I mean, you choose your superpower, getting to live forever, or, you know, getting to teleport through the universe with your mind.
For sure.
I don't know. It's just, I think there's a lot of ways it could have panned out. And I've seen this before, and upon this reading, I didn't find it as compelling.
Sure. And maybe it's one of those examples where it falls victim to, you know, at the time of the writing, it was relatively novel. It had been covered in other works for sure, but it's, you know, 20, 30 years later. So even that, like the multiple experiencings of the books means that we've seen and experienced a lot of other fiction that's maybe a little bit more wild and far-flung. I definitely feel similarly. I'm just like in the recent top 5 episode was talking about the John LeFlambeur series and just how like it broke my brain with how creative I found it, and it's definitely where I'm gravitating these days. So I could totally understand how retreading old ground would get a little frustrating, even though on first reading it was really enjoyable.
I mean, the distinction really needs to be is like you're just fatigued on the concept itself because it's been used before and because we've read this series so many times.
Yeah. For me, at least, it might be a little bit of a byproduct of doing a podcast on them means that, like, unlike reading it for enjoyment or a few years back, it's like really studying it now. And it's maybe just getting a little bit tired towards the end of how much effort we've had to put into this too, for at least for myself.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, it'll warm your heart then to know that when we get done recording and editing this show, we will be free of this series of books forever, really.
Doesn't mean I haven't enjoyed it, but it's just it's been very interesting doing the show with you guys in general, and then this being the first kind of really huge body of work that we've dug into. It's a different thing doing a podcast on something than it is to just experience it.
Right, but I brought up the subject matter to circle back on point as a talking point that I found interesting. So
it's super interesting.
Whatever, fatigue aside, I mean, it's like, I'm really speaking to Ben, I guess, a little bit more than you, is that, there's still commentary on it. You know what I mean? Or you can just, I guess, choose not to because you're tired of it and tired of talking about it or reading about it.
I think, in my estimation, I've given plenty of fair comment on this subject.
Sure. Despite
the recent, answering chat's question, despite that. I just think there's other more interesting concepts like the void which binds and, the technocore and cybrids and abetic and, those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does really veer away from a lot of that stuff and really focuses in on the singular thread of the kind of new Christ thing. I think that might be a good time to kind of take the heady stuff and shift into maybe that action sequence to maybe talk about something light, if that works. What are those things called? The Nemes? They're cybrids or whatever, but do they have a name for them? Not really.
They're called cybrids or whatever. There is no, I called them, I came up with something this morning. Hang on.
Cruditors?
No, not cruditors, not stagnationers.
I believe they end up being referred to as abominations quite a bit.
Grandfather.
They do. I mean, this is ironic. I mean,
not that that's what they're called, but
no, it's not. But that's another interesting dichotomy in the story, Ben, because the church is calling Nia an abomination throughout this and the last book, and they end up being referred to as abominations come the end of the book.
Well, I think like your comment on the meeting in the labyrinth with Albedo or however you pronounce it reminds me of that kind of early inclusion of them in this, where they rescue Nemes from her hole that she's been punished and stuck in for multiple years, and then it leads up to tracking down Rawl on the Rajasthan, India style world that they're hanging out on, where he's got a kidney stone, and the whole like sequence of him getting away, which was pretty Bourne Identity-ish mixed with some crazy sci-fi shit.
Bourne Identity-ish?
Just like the running through the city getting chased kind of shit, like it wasn't Bourne at all, but you know what I mean. Like I just picture like
did he get on a motorcycle at any point?
Yeah, exactly. There's like car chasing around.
Did he shoot some people while he was doing a pirouetting endo?
Yeah, there's a canoe chase. He stabbed somebody with a pen.
Yeah, none of that happened. In fact, nothing even remotely like that happened, but I appreciate you taking the stab, dude.
Well, fine. It's a bad analogy, but I kind of am more talking about like him running for his life. I think does he know that there are abominations chasing him? At what point does he realize that?
He doesn't. He hears the double sonic boom of the dropship coming in, and at that point they're already going into the tunnels, and he knows that the Pax is coming, and that's all he needs to know. He knows that he's going to be in deep shit if he doesn't get the hell out of there. So,
And maybe the Bourne the Bourne person here is Nemes in this case, because she's like sonic screaming sonar shit in the tunnels and all that kind of stuff. I just really enjoyed kind of some of those crazier elements of the Abomination's abilities.
yeah, I thought, see, this part was very cool to me because, okay, and maybe this is just, I think everybody reading this or anybody that would read this would sort of feel this way. Is like Nemes and the clones are just, I think we touched on it in the last story. They're just evil. I mean, they are so evil.
No doubt.
And they have like a bloodlust and a lust for death that is really kind of scary. And I think that, we kind of see Nemes get hers at the end of the first of the Endymion books. And they're so like overconfident, later on in the story, they're so sure that they're going to get the kid in Taishan, But in this part of the story, they get absolutely decimated. And I just loved that she got hers again. They were wrong again. They said in the past, like, the Shrike is irrelevant, you're outdated, you're old, all of that sort of thing. And the Shrike continues to surprise them, which I think is really cool. And I thought that was really cool in this part, how she was in fast time and then all the lights went out and she was like, oh my God, wait, what's going on? And then the Shrike hit her harder than anything has ever hit her and sent her back into the wall like 20 feet. And she broke a bunch of the parts of her body and was literally unconscious for, like a minute or something crazy like that.
Kev, well, Nemes and the other core abominations are busy being cocksure and, basically bragging to each other about how awesome they are. The Shrike's, actually been put in the work, doing those murder workouts.
I knew you were going to say that.
3 sets of 10, bro. To failure.
You can talk the talk, but the Shrike walks the walk. You know what I'm saying?
He does walk the walk. You're right. And he does.
Hard work.
He does. He gets out there, man. He's like Jane Fonda, dude, in the days of yore, man.
He's been bulking up, dude. He's been seriously smashing some protein shakes into his maw and fucking murder workouting like a mofo.
He's been going to those he goes to what workout classes he goes to? He goes to the ones that are run by
Step aerobics?
No, they're the ones that are run by Chad from Double Impact with the pink leggings and the pink
Totally.
karate gis in the next room. Those are the workouts he goes to.
Dude, his brother, Richard Simmons, got him into the kind of aerobic calisthenics stuff. And so that's why he was so pumped when he went to Chad's class. Yeah, totally.
Richard was the gateway.
I could just, because
This week's episode brought to you by the Shrike Workout. On DVD or VHS, just $19.99.
3 sets of 10 is all you need.
But they talk about how he like weighs a metric ton or whatever on the raft. I can just imagine him like on those little step aerobic steps, just like crushing them. And
yes,
imagining this giant like locomotive sized fucking knife machine doing step aerobics makes me so happy.
And him going,
guys, sorry, I broke another step. Do you have another one?
It's like a hydraulic press just exploding this shit on the ground.
There's no step aerobics to the Shrike. There's just stomp aerobics.
Yes, you're dead. You're dead right, Benny. You're dead right. The reason that the abominations get their shit pushed in is they have been laxing on their workouts.
Yes, and I think that the Shrike is, I don't know. I think somewhere between the fall of Hyperion and into Endymion, you start kind of being scared of the Shrike and start like getting stoked when the Shrike shows up in the stories, or and almost like I was rooting for him, like because the Nemes creatures were just so horrible, and then on the shoreline, because he does one thing I love about these stories is that he'll do both perspectives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was at the end of chapter 10 that they're putting him in the water and everything is from Rawls' POV. And then in that, as he's about to transit the Farcaster, he hears these explosions and sees these two bits of really bright white light. And then he gets, as he puts it, a retinal echo of the Shrike. And then he transits the Farcaster. And then in the next chapter, we get the whole, what happened in that part of the scenario from the Nemi's point of view,
Yeah.
which is super cool. Being able to take the samples and the smells and download the smells and send the smells and the smells. And then Briareus basically getting both his hearts ripped out, his, receiver and his transmitter damaged and his head ripped off, like the Shrike biting through his neck and throwing the head out into the water. Just, I love that part. It was a great sort of vindication part of the story.
Mm.
Have we already drawn a Shrike T-1000 analogy?
Chad did, yeah. But we can never have enough.
Okay.
We drew a Nemi's T-1000 analogy. So are you positing that the Shrike is T-1000-ish and Nemi's is like the Arnie style Terminators or what?
Wait, what was the Arnie style Terminator?
He was a T-800.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because I said that the Arnie was the T-800.
Was, okay. I'm sorry. I meant the T-800 analogy. Excuse me.
So we have a Terminator death. I see.
Terminator death.
Whoa, that's a first.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the Shrike is the Arnie style mechanical. Yeah, T-800. Totally. I'm with you all the way.
Yeah, it goes from being the antagonist at the beginning to sort of the
Savior, well,
defender.
protector. Yeah.
Everybody's buddy.
Protector, yeah.
So is Rahl or Ania the John Connor?
Oh, Ania's John Connor, dude.
So does that
And
mean
Rahl's
Rahl's the redheaded shithead on the back of the moped in T2?
No, dude. Who, Danny Cooksey?
Yeah, whatever.
From Danny Cooksey from Different Strokes?
There you go.
Anybody?
I like it.
Yeah, no, lost on me.
The older nerds out there will get that.
I believe you and I love it. Who is he then? Who's Rahl? Sarah?
I'm still thinking about Different Strokes. Sorry. Gary Coleman.
He's Michael Biehn, man.
He's Michael Biehn, dude. He's
Mm.
Hicks. I mean,
Hicks.
We have another
that's
death.
a freaking
We have
death
another
right there,
Terminator
dude. We
death.
got double Terminator deaths.
Getting fucking terminated over here, boys.
We getting terminated.
I'm dancing around the fact that I can't remember what his name was in the Terminator.
Reese. Kyle Reese.
Kyle Reese. Jesus. Well done. Glad we landed that one. We got to get some Terminator movies in, apparently, because my Terminator lexicon is not up to snuff right now.
Ben, I love how you said nicely done on something I absolutely should have known. And you should have known. That was pretty.
Hey, man, you almost crashed the plane, but you landed it. So
Yeah.
I'm just giving credit where credit's due.
I guess so. I think it's, I just think
We're
it's
both
funny that
sweating, pulling on the yokes, like,
Right.
white knuckling it, gritting our teeth, and, nice soft splashdown. Sully would have been proud.
I guess my purview is that we're totally screwing up and we're patting each other on the back for some lame save. I like your more positive take better.
I'm not denying the fact that we, flew into a
Flock of seagulls.
Flock of birds.
flock of geese, but, or a flock of seagulls, whatever.
No, in this case, for this show, it would be a flock of radiant gossamers,
Whoa.
right?
Yes, of course.
Because if I could just segue for a second, he talks about radiant gossamers so much in these 4 books, it's borders on madness.
I'm
for
taking
me.
a death here because I cannot recall a single time that is like, I'm like,
Oh my God, I feel like every single world he describes, it's like there are arboreals and radiant gossamers. A radiant gossamer flitted from one flower to the next, like every single scene. There's just radiant gossamers everywhere. I'm like, what is a radiant gossamer anyway?
What the hell is a radiant gossamer anyway?
I don't know.
I want radiant gossamers on my pizza.
Fair enough.
Hang on, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to eject.
I feel
and
like
look that up.
I feel like
Radiant-
this. Well, gossamer's like a thread, isn't it? So radiant would be like a light reflecting thread. That's what I'd kind of a thread of light or something.
I'm going with it, some luminescent small flying beast,
Okay.
an insect or like a hummingbird or something like that.
I got a definition here. Hang on.
We better hurry up, or the show's going to start getting a bit stagnacious. Am I right?
Gossamer, at least on the internet, on Bing, it means a fine filmy substance consisting of cobwebs spun by small spiders.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like the fine threads of light. Yeah, exactly.
They're like hummingbirds, sort of.
The spider web is exactly the opposite of a fucking hummingbird, bro.
It's nothing like a hummingbird.
No, radiant gossamers, you knucklehead.
You just read the definition of gossamer as a fucking spiderweb's thread, and radiant means it's like light reflective.
I get that. What I'm saying is that I believe that he meant them to be similar to hummingbirds in some way.
Okay.
You know what? Let's unpack this, Chad, and talk about it for another 20 minutes.
Hashtag Stagnaceous.
I think Radiant Gossamers is only seconded by Simmons' never-ending description of what the fuck Ania is doing with her hands.
Right?
I know. Dude, you said that in the last one, man.
She's got her little sign language thing going on.
I think I said it in the game. I think I said it after or in a conversation in between, yeah.
You're right. He does. He talks about her hand gestures all the time. And it's always, which I later came to understand as X.
Yeah, which I later came to understand
it's all
was
like,
subtlety between shut the fuck up, I hate you, and I love you and want to make love to you right now. And you're just like, what in the fuck are you talking about?
It really got on my nerves this time around.
You know what, though, Benny?
It's like, but anybody really have that much patience with her? Like, to, you know.
I'll take fucking the sign language bullshit over the Aiua thing any day, though, Benny.
Oh, any day, yeah.
Aiua?
Which is an Ender's Game universe book fucking 4 shit show. That if I saw that word one more time, I was going to go on a killing spree. So,
what is Aiua?
It's the radiant gossamer of the Ender's Game universe.
For real? Like it's a creature?
No, it's like
it means like a spirit or soul, but more than that.
Connected via threads, and don't worry about it. It's fucking ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. He says the word Aiua like 10,000 times.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's like the Yauta in the Predator lore.
Yeah, it's like the Tatanka in the
Dances with Wolves lore. Oh, these are a few of my hated things. Radiant gossamers. Mixed with Aiua.
Well, I don't know where the fuck we are, but here we are.
We were about to touch down on the kidney stone planet.
Ah. Chapter 3 of the book, yes.
I love when you get fatigued about a particular piece of content that we're talking about, Ben. It's very funny.
I'm not fatigued. We got sidetracked like as we
tried to move it along.
We kind of started touching on the abominations, and then I think we like went on a major cul-de-sac when we started talking about the strike workout and all
strike
that
workout.
stuff.
Was totally worth it.
I was saying that, like, you've mentioned that, you know, you were like, oh, I found this concept boring this time, or this, you know, it was kind of a slog to get through this book this time. That's what I was really talking about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm fatigued with it. I really am. It'll be a good long time before I ever pick this up again.
I will agree, though, Benny. Like, I found the Rawl stuff, all of his interplanetary bullshit, like, I just kind of didn't. I don't know. We've touched on this a little bit in some of the other episodes on this series where it's like, I wish I could listen or read this for the first time again. Because I've read it so many times now that I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't really care about this whole chunk. And, like, focusing on certain other chunks of the book. So, I feel you.
Yeah, I feel you, man. That's how I felt about The Scholar's Tale in the first one, you know. And you were pushing, like, you know, oh, it's really good. We got da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, yeah.
Like, the Rawl stuff's cool. The gas giant stuff, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point, and the, you know, all the various shit that he gets up to. It's just not
hijinks.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's hijinks. Like, maybe it kind of literally is the action sequences to kind of like intersperse between the crazy ass navel gazy sermons that are being told throughout the rest of the book.
Wow, man, you guys have got a good amount of vitriol for this book.
It's not even vitriol. It's like it's. I guess it's like 3 books have built up to the crescendo, and there's a lot that needs to be covered. And so, like, thinking about it structurally, it would have been really hard to tackle and try and thread it together because you need the exposition, you need the sermons and the kind of like conversations about the void which binds and all of the stuff like reminding us of the AI, and you need it all. But like to make an interesting book out of it is a totally different story. So it kind of makes sense the way that it's structured.
I totally agree with you. And I mean, while the exploits of Rawl are Hijinktual in nature, there's another one for you.
There you go. 0 results on Google.
You know, they're necessary parts of the story, you know, and they're good parts of the story too. I really enjoyed them. I didn't have anything in this that I was like, I just gotta skip over this because I can't deal with it. You know, like I found it all. And again, I mean, for the listeners out there, that's coming from 3 people that have read and listened to these books numerous times, and now we have to do it to do this show. It's not like we're picking it up and going, oh man, I want to read this again. You know.
Yeah, I really need to be a little more charitable in my estimation of things. It's just that I know the story. I read it a bunch of times, and my appetite for it by the time we got to this final section, I found
had waned.
I was lacking patience for it unfolding.
Yeah,
and you know, I felt very bogged down in all the parts. Like, if anything, I enjoyed the Rawl's little, you know, adventure was the only respite from, you know, Ania constantly expounding on, you know, philosophical and religious ideas, which that part just, I'd had enough. I didn't want to hear any more of it.
Right. But if you could sort of put aside for a second that we, have read these so many times and maybe think back to an earlier reading of it, what was your... I mean, that's really kind of more the way, well, I don't know. I guess that doesn't really apply. You know what I mean? Like,
I think...
I'm trying to separate fatigue from, like, what's actually here and what's really good, I guess, a little bit.
I understand that. I just don't know that I can do that now that I know what I know. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I think it's a good example of us tackling the first book club series. Like, it's interesting to get to the end of a 4-book series the first time we've ever talked about books and realizing just how deeply you need to delve into it. And it's almost inevitable to get a little tired of something of this scope. So I don't know. Yeah, I kind of feel similar. Like you can't really separate yourself from the kind of level of fatigue or whatnot.
I think on my first reading of this, if that's in my estimation, what I remember was that I was invested in the characters, and it wasn't that the highfalutin concepts really appealed to me, but I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was worried about the characters, and that was I had an emotional connection to Ball and Nia and everybody.
Sure.
And, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen, and that was sort of what I found compelling and what kept me engaged with it.
It drives everything
more than
forward.
Yeah. And on this one, I was just like, ugh, I hate her. She waves her hands one more time, I'm going to tear him off.
And throw him into the river.
You sound like you were like me with my memoirs of hatred about Avatar, dude.
Exactly. I remember being like in my early 20s when I read this for the first time. So still a baby. And I remember being very struck by the very high level concept of love being a fundamental force in the universe, like gravity and and like electromagnetism. That was a super, you know, hippy dippy but interesting explored space.
I don't think that's hippy dippy, man. I think it's
from a scientific perspective. Generally, it would be considered such, but that doesn't mean it's to be disregarded. You know,
absolutely. I wouldn't disregard it. I mean.
But I guess what I'm saying is I wasn't disregarding it. It was just,
got it.
You know, some would, but it resonated with me at the time, and it still resonates with me in a different way now.
I do. I also enjoyed that aspect of it. I just don't know there's a lot of time spent on it.
No. And when it is, it's very expositional or like a sermon or something. But
it's not, yeah, I agree. It's not enough time spent on that because that's a super cool concept. You know, like the concept of energy, ki, chi, Holy Spirit, love, all of that. It's all the same thing. You know what I mean? And in that being a major force in the universe. I mean, that's something that we're discovering now and in the last couple of decades as a people on the planet. You know what I mean? So it's not entirely surprising of its inclusion in the book, but I also agree with you that he did not spend enough time talking about it because it is a very cool concept. I've been fascinated with it since I started studying it in martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Would it be worth touching on the father captain or that mercantile character at all? It might be good just to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just to wrap up the hijinks of Rawl, the Hijinktual escapades.
One result, by the way, Jimmy, you Google. Let me know.
Nice.
So even more obscure in the universe.
I like it.
Hijinktual?
Hijinktual.
Really?
I mean, it was cool that the Zeppelins and the little platelet creatures, you know, like it was. I liked the inclusion of other sentient beings, you know, because we sort of the console touched at the end of the Fall of Hyperion on how, you know, we basically just went in and destroyed anything that was remotely intelligent on any of these planets, you know, and these creatures have obviously been saved and have thrived, you know, and also in collusion with the Ousters. So it was cool that they were included in the Jovian planet. I mean, it was certainly a very harrowing journey, you know, flying through the air on the parasail kayak, you know, and then getting, you know, swallowed by one of the Zeppelins and then basically puked out through the next Farcaster portal.
Right.
And then the other thing too is that I just every time I read it, still not as much as the first time, obviously, but I still like when he's lying in the water and he goes to ask the Comlog bracelet something, and it's the actual ship, and he realizes that he's on the planet that the ship is. Like the feeling of relief that I had, the sigh of relief, you know, was just it was great, you know, because he's got a broken leg. He's trying to navigate like through this really harsh environment, the rain and the wet and the water and the overflowed river, and all of a sudden the ship is like, "Oh, would you like me to come and get you, Endymion?" I was like, oh my God. I was like, thank God he found the ship, man. You know, like it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get the impression that the ship was kind of fucking with him.
I do.
I suppose it's Johnny or whatever, isn't it?
Yes and no.
Later, you know, we get that bit about the console. In the course of learning the language of the living and the language of the dead, we learned that, you know, the console was, or the Keats persona was inhabiting the ship, but not in the sense of being the ship. He was, you know, a holographic projection on the ship, and he hung out with the console for a long time, and then he left and went back to the core to kind of create chaos, which I thought was a cool,
okay, gotcha.
You know, finding out what happened to him, you know, and the console, you know. But I think what happened,
I forgot about all that stuff.
Yeah, I did too, and I think what happened was that him being there in whatever form, whether he was inside the ship's neural net or whatever, like it certainly left an impression in the ship that the ship never lost, you know, or something like that. You know, that's the only thing that I can kind of come up with.
Well, just to expound on what I said about the ship fucking with him, it's, you know, it just seemed like it was sort of the evolution of the like cantankerous sort of relationship that Rawl always had with or at least with the Comlog version of the ship's personality. That just, you know, I just got this impression that the ship was like just fucking with him, just like watching him struggle and like kind of laughing to itself, knowing that it was going to save him. But, you know,
I love how this book came out in 1997, and it so perfectly encapsulates the relationship that I and many others have with the various voice assistants that we now have in our lives, where it's just like, shut the fuck up,
yes.
You know, whenever it chimes in and stuff.
Oh my God, the freaking Google Assistant is so annoying on my phone. I just want to stab my phone. Because if I say something that sounds like, hey, Google, it'll like pop up and I'm like, oh God, it just did it right now.
Well, it's because you said, hey, Google. I mean,
I know I did. You're right.
I'm sure we've mentioned it in another episode, but I definitely love how accurate Rawl's relationship to the Comlog is with that. It's just perfect.
Well, doubly so, because in the beginning of the last episode, the first book, or the Endymion book, rather, I commented on how I loved how Rawl had that really cool conversation with the ship at the beginning of the story when he first meets the ship. And he's very polite to the ship and treating it as though it's another entity or person, and he even goes so far as to say, thank you, it was nice talking to you. And then to watch that relationship degrade into basically good child mode, it was funny.
Yeah, totally.
I really hope that people's phones. I hope every time we said "Okay, Google," and even just that one time, that everybody's Google Assistant chimed in and stopped the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure it happened.
Oh wow, yeah, I just got what you were saying. I just got what you were doing there.
Just to add some weight to that entire
Totally.
conversation.
Some of the tech podcasts I listen to beep out those kinds of things because it has activated so many times on listeners' phones and stuff. So it's funny.
That is funny.
They'll play it on their speakers at home or something. I would love to touch on, even if it's briefly, the merchant and his sidekick thread.
Kenzo
and
Izozaki
the DeSoya stuff. Yeah.
Anna Konya Panini.
Banana fan of Fofani. Ooh, yeah. I need a panini right now.
Anna Pella Panini, yes. And Kenzo Izozaki, yeah. Super interesting character, for sure. His thread throughout the story is great, and I like the resolution of his thread as well at the very end of the book.
Which was?
That he basically was running everything in a very diplomatic and fair way. Like after the Pax basically fell apart, like he became.
Oh yeah.
He was on the Taurus sans Cruciform, and he was, keeping everything running, man, keeping everything moving, getting the ships, bringing goods in and sending goods out, and making sure that the lights were still on. And I
keeping
dug that.
it real,
yeah, keeping it real. He was like, for 100 years.
But the scene with he and his assistant where he makes her strip down and he strips down, and just to make a point about the cruciform, which that was a little noteworthy weird.
Why did you think that was weird? Did he made her take her take her shirt off, you mean?
They stripped completely naked, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think it was just tops, but you may be right. I'm pretty sure it was just tops.
But to make a point on the power structure or whatever of the cruciform.
In the sense of his whole thread, man, I think that was to point out that was to talk about how the cruciform is the power. And that was the beginning of, that sends him off on the whole, not the beginning of it, but it sends him off on his whole, like, approaching the core and approaching Albedo to try to, get their own kind of side deal going so he can kind of grab more power, I guess. At least that's how I interpreted it.
I get the point he's making. It's just, I guess Simmons, as the author, goes into describing the perfect shape of her breasts and her pert nipples, and it was a little
overkill.
I wasn't like offended or anything. It just upon listening to it this time, I was like, well, that's so, I don't know if that was necessary detail, but in general, I just tend to get cringy when, those kinds of things, that description of sex, etc., happens in books, so that's all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I understand the point he was trying to make. I just didn't see that it was 100% necessary. I think Simmons was trying to create some gravity there in the situation, but
right.
I don't know if it was 100% necessary.
No, I get that. I don't think it was either. It was weird. It is interesting later when he does meet with Albedo, and Albedo's just like squeezes his hand together, force choke style. The guy's whole body just starts like writhing in pain and convulsing. That was another interesting. We get a couple of tastes of the cruciforms being shock collars in this, and one of them is when they're torturing Corporal Key and the various different glyphs that are on the machine that symbolize different simulated feelings when he's being tortured. I thought that was pretty cringeworthy, especially the one that was crushed testicles.
Yeah. And was that related to the cruciform? Because if so, it was like a bit of foreshadowing, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Is that it's
no, I know. I just don't remember that it was directly connected, but you do obviously.
Yeah, it was that's how they tortured him.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, hot poker down the throat wasn't a very good one either.
No.
It got a bit dark at times.
A little bit.
Besides Izazaka, or what else did you want to talk about Kenzo?
That's it. Just that he was interesting. It was a new thread. There aren't very many new threads introduced in these books, and it was just kind of a new character and sidekick. And it served an interesting purpose, and I like you said, the resolution where he picks up the pieces of the packs and starts running the logistics side of things.
Yeah.
But it was just an interesting new thread.
Yeah, I like...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
The power grab is kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, and he gets just fucking shot down super quick. Yeah, totally.
But then he also gets... It's important to maybe note that, he does get found out, and then he gets sort of demoted and put in the ranks of the Knights of the whatever that are part of the Crusade, and they send him packing into space.
Right.
That's sort of his punishment, I guess you could say.
He basically gets ratted out by Albedo, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about DeSoya for a second, because I think that in the last episode for the last book, we talked about how he was the one that, kind of truly believed the precepts of the church and was carrying those forward. Like his moral compass was right. And we see that again in a sort of more amplified in this story / kind of a continuation from the first story, in the sense that he completely mutinies from Pax fleet along with pretty much all of his crew, and they end up fighting against the Pax and destroying many, many, many of the ships. Yeah,
he goes full rogue in this one. It was
full rogue. There you go. That was a great. I really like that. The extension of that, or the continuation of that.
And it seems to really come out of the PTSD style recollections and confessionals with his crew, with Redhead or whatever. Was it Redhead?
Redhead died.
And who's the other one? There's Redhead and
Gregorius.
Yeah, maybe it was Gregorius who was doing the confessional stuff.
He was. Gregorius was doing the confessions, yeah.
I like the idea of kind of DeSoya and Gregorius having some sympathy towards Ania in the climax of the third book, the Endymion book, and then kind of realizing just how fucked up some of the stuff they had done in this through that confessional conversation kind of really is one of the driving forces of the mutiny.
No doubt. That was one of the highlights for me from this book was Gregorius's very vivid description of basically going in and killing babies and watching them all die from decompression and explosion.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
And effective. It was very effective, and it's a plausible reason for those characters to make the changes that they did, and then it kind of like also connects you as a reader to them, and you have more sympathy for the tribulations that they've gone through.
Agreed.
Yeah. I had one feeling, and that was, it's about goddamn time.
Yeah, exactly.
What, that they defected like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was getting a little fatigued of DeSoya trying to be the good priest, and, it just, that thread started to annoy me. I'm like, all right, dude, do you not see what's happening here? Like, come on.
Right.
Chop.
I agree.
Do the right thing.
I agree. And his resolution was cool too. I mean, also that he got punished and sent back to his original homeworld,
which he liked. He's like, thank fuck, I'm out of this.
That's right. Where a boot full of piss sells for $15. Then gets called back, then mutinies, and then he ends up with the rest of the sort of epic people from this situation on the tree ship later on. Him and Gregorius.
I love the little moment there where it talks about him trying to find out Gregorius' surname and finding out that he comes from a planet where you shed all of your weakness names. That was such a cool little piece of lore.
Yeah, that was a really cool piece of lore. I agree. And there's like 9 weakness names, so he's like super powerful because he's
very like 1 in 3,000 people shed their second to last weakness name or whatever. It was super cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. Nice inclusion in the story because he was a great character. You always kind of wanted to know more about Gregorius, or you wanted to, at least in the various times I've read and listened to these, you want to know more about him. You want more scenes with him. All of that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't help but picture Michael Clarke Duncan every time I think about him because that's the way he's sort of described.
Sure.
R.I.P. Michael Clarke Duncan.
Were you going to say something there, buddy?
I was just going to say that the weakness names thing. Was a really interesting way to illustrate just how much of a badass Gregarious was.
Yeah, very concisely
That's all.
done. Yeah, for sure.
The other highlight of that section that I thought was worth mentioning was the showdown in tactical space, right? Like as they were kind of breaking off from the fleet, to the actual point of the physical mutiny, when they were about to leave and they're both in tactical space with their stunners, him and the other commander, which I believe was Mother Captain Stone, who was his old XO.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And it was this kind of like, little game kind of to see who was going to do what and who was going to draw first and what was going to happen, and they end up escaping. And it was just it was a great description. He really took his time with that scene in the book, and I really enjoyed it. Some really cool imagery there.
Another well-executed action-y sequence. You don't get a hell of a lot of ship battling in these, and this one in particular.
No, but there's still, I don't know, there's a good amount of action for what is going on in terms of heady material in this book. There's a lot of action that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So moving right along to the getting towards the, I think we can talk about the end now. It's getting,
We're basically there anyways.
yeah. I mean, there's at the end of the story we get, okay, so they end up at the bio star tree ring. What is it called? The star tree ring?
It's like a Dyson sphere of fucking greenery.
Yeah, the idea is that it will be a Dyson sphere. I mean, in essence, a Dyson sphere. I think they call it the star tree. The star tree biosphere.
It's the star tree.
Isn't that right? The star tree biosphere. So
I think so.
That part of the story, kind of what like Ben's answer to my question before, like that is the stuff that I really wanted to know more about. And I loved all of the scenes in these stories that talked about the ousters and how they have adapted all of these life forms to space. Just absolutely fascinated me and blew me away, up to and including fish flying around in space and all of this gravity simulated by these ergs and the watering of these trees and all of that stuff was just incredibly, incredibly cool. What did you guys think about all of that?
Yeah, I remember early days, like thinking back to my first read through, like that's definitely the kind of shit I'm super into. But as Benny mentioned, they didn't spend a ton of time on it. But yeah, I remember it being super interesting at the first read through. Still is. Like I think I'd love a whole book on all that kind of oustery shit, but probably never going to happen.
Yeah, I think the ousters are really the true, branch of humanity that has evolved and that seems to have just the fact that they've bent themselves to fit the environment as opposed to trying to bend the environment to fit, their native form, I think is very interesting. And the fact that they've evolved to live in all these niches and places in the universe is interesting. And yeah, I think they're very interesting in general, more so than, Pax space and, that branch of humanity that's just kind of, as you said, stagnating in their own, let's do this shit over and over again, sort of, I don't even know what to call it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, monkeys with sticks. Same shit.
Yeah.
Different fight.
That's disappointing. I don't think, I think it's less likely that that's what humanity would actually look like. I think it's more likely that we would just be gone.
Yeah, we would destroy ourselves.
Still doing that. Yeah. I don't see that being likely.
But in 97, it might have been more plausible in terms of like optimism.
Oh, I mean, that's just like a drop in the bucket as far as the time scales we're talking about here. But
yeah, true. But I just mean in the sense of like societal, like instead of it being like total annihilation versus total ouster success in the mid to late 90s, like we were kind of riding the highs back in the late 90s, and I could see them going through the like stagnation versus annihilation, whereas nowadays you'd be much more likely to write about the annihilation, as like you said, it's way more plausible that we just blow ourselves up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a preference as to whether or not we end up, more like the ousters or blowing ourselves up. I just don't think that the stagnation is a particularly believable thread for moving forward.
Yeah, I would agree.
Thousands of years into the future,
Yeah.
I think it's more likely that, we'll either be gone or we'll probably be unrecognizable to ourselves.
Yeah, certainly post-human.
So when we get to the bio star tree part of the book, we finally get the sort of the congregation of most of the major players in this entire saga. We've also found out that the Rachel that she pals around with is the pre-Fabiana Moneta Rachel Weintraub, which I completely forgot. Before I did this go through, I seemed to remember that it wasn't the same Rachel, but it turns out that it was. And we also meet back up with Cassad, and we finally learn the fate of Hetmastine, which I also forgot. There's a lot of stuff I forgot about the end of this. And it was great to see all of those threads closed out, certainly the ones that were more mysterious, like Hetmastine.
And the original Pilgrim threads getting closed up, yeah.
Well, and I also liked, especially with Mastine, how, in the first book he's saying, I was chosen to pilot the Tree of Pain during the time of atonement. But the Tree of Pain turns out to be the Yggdrasil, not the thorn tree. It was never the thorn tree. It was the Yggdrasil. And he was sent back in time. So he was pulled forward in time to this part of the story, and then his fate is back in time at the Valley of the Time Tombs, which I find fascinating. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And the tree burning up like that was the tree that he came back with in the future, from the future rather. And here going all along in the first story and even in the second story, you think like, oh, well, that's the Yggdrasil and it's just burning up and dying.
Yeah, I totally forgot about all of that Hetmastine stuff.
Yeah, I really felt like there was a thread there that I was missing, but I was also simultaneously completely convinced that I must have been imagining it but before they actually got to that, part of the book. So much same.
It was really, it was good. It was satisfying seeing a lot of those threads wrapped up like that. I mean, we already talked about Duray and what happens with him and in Corporal Key, but, touching on Mastine, it was good to see Mastine's thread get wrapped up. And to know what happens to Cassad in the interim between him, fighting the battle with the Shrike in the fall of Hyperion and that point in time and, him becoming the template for the Shrike, And I like that she sent him back to Mars to, basically return law and order to the original solar system in preparation for the return of the Earth. That was cool.
Very fitting for him.
I wanted to get back to something before you ended up moving on rather quickly, but what's the deal with Rachel not, talking like Fabiana in this book?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
Yeah, that was weird.
It's kind of one thread that stuck out at me is
she's not Fabiana Moneta.
Yeah, when did the transition come? Like, how did,
Yeah, that is weird, actually. I never thought about that. You're right.
It strikes me as like a voice acting character choice that maybe he wasn't familiar with all of the works at that stage or something. Who knows?
I think he just screwed up. I think they just kind of screwed that up a little bit. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, she's in her like early 20s. So she's essentially back to the age she was when she started regressing in age.
Yeah, I guess it's less of a plot hole and more of a acting mistake. I guess.
Seems like it. That's what I think.
I mean, maybe you're right, but the other thing too is that my understanding from the first two books was that she went with her father who raised her in the future. So that would posit that she returned from an even further future back to this time to pal around with Ania and meet Cassad for the first time, obviously.
Yeah, she's traveling through time. I just don't understand why that would change the way that she speaks.
Yeah, and also that she says in the first story that, let's see, it's his past, her future. And then he says the first meeting was at Agincourt, right? But that's not the first meeting. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, you're right. Never mind.
For him as a young man, it is.
For him, it is. Yeah. Yeah, it gets convoluted there.
It gets messy, for sure.
I think it's just acting. Like, who knows what order they recorded these things in? It could be that he forgot that he'd already made,
Maybe. You could see how he would, how one would make the choice to give her an exotic accent in the first 2 books, and it's relatively reasonable to assume that, you know, you get hired to read the first one, and you might not have read all 4 of them, but that's total guesswork. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, Victor Biehn had a lot on his plate there, so
Clearly.
we'll forgive him a little bit of continuity error.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give him some latitude. What else? What else do we want to cover here?
What did you guys think of the moment of sharing or whatever? The
shared moment. Yeah.
Yeah, just in the sense of, like, it was interesting to read it this time around, and I'm curious how you took it on this read.
Well, the shared moment was her dying essentially on the rack, cross, whatever it was. Correct? Or am I not remembering it right? Okay. Well, I mean, I like that she, being the main character, dies in the story, and it's not fluffy. I like it was horrific the way she died. I know my memory is a little vague of what exactly the shared moment is. Is it the entirety? Is it the moment she died? Is it the entirety of her torture and death?
My memory of it is that's what it is.
What, the latter?
That it's her torture and death.
I also always thought it was the torture and death.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, like the whole Christ on the cross experience, basically shared with all of humanity.
But
yeah,
but like you mentioned earlier, Ben, with the Stranger in the Strangeland thing, like I feel like everyone got to experience the torture and death, but the people like Rawl that, you know, learned all of the skills were able to look back and experience everyone else's memories as well. So it was only the learned that could, you know, jump into DeSoya's shoes and see the whole story from start to finish. But the shared moment I thought was just the death.
Oh, yeah. No, I wasn't talking about that, though. I was just talking about Ania's experiences.
Yeah.
On her way to death, yeah.
Horrific. I mean, kind of Jesus-esque, but not enough like that to really draw a comparison, I guess. Maybe not. I just found that the torture was horrific. I mean, it was graphic and it was descriptive, and I liked it. I liked the descriptiveness of it because it made it graphic and it evoked a response from me. I found it horrible and horrifying. And the way they went about it and how cowardly the PAX leaders were. You know, they were all there in hologram form. They weren't actually there. You know, so that just added another layer of distaste to the PAX leadership, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's graphic, it's wrong, it's horrific. But I think what always gets to me about that part is viewing it through Rawl's lens.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think like the final moment is viewed through Rawl's lens, I believe. And, you know, his description of you know, a sort of crescendo of pain leading to just nothing and realizing that she's gone. That always hits me in the feels, even this time, even in my salty reading of it this time.
Even in your...
Yeah, same.
Nice. Yeah, agree.
It's interesting that Rawl didn't understand that it was shared to other people beyond him as well.
That was interesting. I also, well, it's not exactly related to this, but yeah, I thought that was interesting too. He time and again, he's, you know, I think he even says it in this part of the story where he's like with the free casting, you know, he starts free casting around and then he's like, oh, I thought I was the only one that could do that. You know, there's numerous moments in these 2 books where he's like that, where he's like, oh, I thought that, I thought that was just me. I guess not. Now I'm all deflated and dejected, you know?
I can identify with that, though. That's funny.
Rawl, he doesn't really get to feel very special ever in this story.
No, he doesn't. He's just kind of an everyman, and, you know, it's funny the way he's written. I like it.
That's what I like about him, though, the everyman stuff.
Yeah, he's that well-intentioned and well-educated hick.
Yeah, that's it. And he's not a glistening hero like you've mentioned in other recent episodes, which would have fallen.
I don't imagine Rawl ever glistening in this story.
No.
Glistening? No.
Yes, glistening.
Maybe on the raft, like when they were on one of the hot worlds and it got hot and he took his shirt off. There could be some glistening there. I could see that, but
Nah, he's got under
Mr.
boob
Simmons,
sweat
I
on
think
his
right
shirt.
now would
That's
be a
it.
good opportunity for me to take my shirt off.
Mr. Simmons,
Gene.
Richard, Gene, Dan, I think this next scene would be a perfect opportunity for me to take my shirt off.
Now I'm always going to picture Magani as Rawl. That's kind of fucked up.
Sure. Why not? These long, wavy locks blowing in the breeze.
Age aside, he would have made a great role.
Totally.
Get the right kind of vibe, I think.
Okay, so the shared moment, and then Ben, we somewhat touched on this before, or was there anything else about the shared moment? Anybody wanted to contribute?
Not really.
No.
So, like I said, we kind of touched on this before, but we get the resolution of like kind of all the things that Ania was like, I can't tell you this now, but you're just going to have to trust me.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to make a quick, another commentary on that, I think that that's sort of speaking to just the concept of faith in general, trust and faith when she's saying those things to him. I know that it bothered you or both of you. And if there's one saving grace in that, I guess that would be it, maybe. But we get the resolution of that, when they go to Old Earth and we find out that, they're going to have the baby and this is the time for them to have the baby and be with the baby and all of that sort of thing. And then she will go backward in time and live out that part and die, essentially.
In a Gripes of Kev-esque mindset,
Please.
I found Rawl's reaction and like being a jealous douche. I think even from the first read through, I found it really dumb. I like the way that it resolves with them being on Earth and then exactly what you just said, but I just found him being a weirdo about it. Maybe not super plausible. I don't know how I would describe it, but it kind of frustrated me throughout.
When she tells him that there was another, or that she had a...
Yeah, and then
What
he's
does
like,
she
what do
tell-
you
she tells him
fucking
that she had a
mean?
child.
It's just like, whatever, dude. Get over it. It's been years.
Yeah,
He doesn't tell him that it was his.
Well, I didn't really. I mean, for my money, like just to address that whole issue, I mean, she should just never have said anything. Why on earth would you say anything? Like, knowing what you know and knowing about the future, or at least having impressions of the future or memories of the future, why would you say like, oh, I went and I had a child and, oh, it's too hard to explain and I'll explain it later. It's like, oh, yeah, that's real satisfying. Thanks.
Yeah.
Like, just omit it altogether.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's a perfect classic example of my sort of frustration with Ania through this whole thing. Like, why did she put Rawl through it in the fucking first place?
Yeah.
Other than, sending him, knowing that he was going to spawn midair on a Jovian planet and, fall
Needed a parachute.
while uselessly in a fucking canoe. I mean, I think after that, I would have slapped her the next time I saw her.
So salty. I love it. I think it's like in this particular case, it's a story. This gripe exists in the actual story between two characters versus our previous conversation about Ania saying she's going to be in love with him when she's like 11 years old. And it's just like, why did that need to be said? Just leave it, like they can fall in love later or whatever. But it's just another, oddball example of either a not necessary thing or a mildly frustrating thing. But like I said, it's a bit of a gripe to Kev.
And founded. I mean, I think that is just a gripe and not a gripe of Kev. Like, that's
Yeah, fair enough. It's a gripe.
It's a valid point, man. I mean, I would say if there's only a few little, scratches and dings and plot holes in this whole series of books, that would definitely be one of them,
I like that they end up back on Earth together, and it surprised me the first time I read it, but I still enjoy it, I guess. I still get a bit confused just because, like, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around the time loopy stuff. It gets between Cassad and there's just a lot of circular stuff going on.
Agree. And that stuff gets a little bit muddy, for sure. With Rachel, Cassad, and Mastine and all of that, it definitely gets a little bit muddy at the end, for sure. But
it's interesting.
Yeah, very. And I think that, I don't know, like, I love that Silenus made it to 1,000 years of being alive. And I also like that Rawl was really the one that finished the Cantos in the cat box, in the litter box, rather.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting that it's Silenus is like the last man standing in terms of the original pilgrims because he's such a fuck knuckle throughout the first book.
Yeah, I mean, well, wait, no, he's not.
I was just going to say I found the conclusion of Cypenus' arc to be quite satisfying.
Definitely.
Me too.
Yeah, definitely.
Me too. But he wasn't the last man standing. I mean, Kassad was still around, but he had been sort of bounced forward in time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what exactly.
Non-time shifty pilgrims, the linear pilgrims, he's the last one,
I mean, he did it at the very least, like he did it the hardcore way. Like he was doing the cold sleeps in the freezer, dude. Like he, you know what I mean? Like
yelling at his androids, like, where are my teeth? They haven't grown in yet, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. He did it the hard way. He didn't get leapt around through time and have a cruciform and all that like everybody else.
He's just such a funny dude. I like Silenus. You kind of hate him in the first few chapters of the first book, but you just grow to appreciate his crudeness and funniness.
No doubt.
Good old Cypenus.
Mm-hmm. What's Abedic's conclusion? I don't remember.
Well, Abedic is the observer from the
that's
lions
right.
and tigers and bears. And that part,
yeah.
We talked about in Fall of Hyperion how finding out that Moneta was Rachel just blew all of our minds. And when I found out that Abedic was the observer, it just blew me away. I never saw it coming, and I just thought it was super cool. And, then thinking back on the androids, and like that's the perfect sort of guise to be observing any events for a long period of time, because you're really talking about, nearly 500 years or something crazy like that, or maybe not, maybe 300 years, but still, like that's a lot of time. So I thought it was a interesting and cool choice that they chose to be in the form of androids that were long-lived so that they could, stick around and witness and somewhat help out a little bit what was going to happen.
Yeah, my reaction to it was I was blown away, but I was also very, my thought was, of course, like it fit really nicely. It was a very good decision on Simmons's part to, make that be a thing. I don't know if he decided at the last minute or if that's like what he was thinking all along, but it worked.
Fit.
Very much so.
No gripes of Kev there.
No.
Yeah, none. No, that was good. I really dug that a lot. That was a great reveal, along with many of the other reveals that happened that we've touched on already in the wrapping up of the story.
And that's pretty much all the threads, I believe.
Yeah, that's pretty much the size of it.
That's it.
Unless there's any other moments, I think we touched on moments that we liked, but if there's any other moments that tickled you in a particular way, either of you?
Just the murder workouts.
Yeah.
Rawl defeating Nemes was pretty satisfying.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was real good.
That was cool.
Despite the fact that his scalp was falling off of his head at the conclusion of it.
Oh, my God.
There's some pretty good stuff in there.
Really, really good stuff in there, man. I liked the other thing I really liked, too, was the Tai Shan and how very simple everything was. And the technology was very simple. Like they sort of refused to use any kind of highfalutin new age technology. So like the slideway and the cableways, like all of that stuff I thought was super cool, and how everybody just used those things to get around. Like that was the sort of norm, I really dug that. And the glider trip obviously was very, that was a cool part as well. But just the sort of the lay of the land there, I think. And in particularly the slideway and the cableways, But the one other thing was that I liked how on Tai Shan and some of the other worlds that he describes, like they're not habitable except for like a particular area of the planet. So like if you go too low to the surface, you get into the acid clouds or the acid ocean or whatever it is on Tai Shan. But then there's this band section of the planet, at a certain altitude where it's perfectly habitable, and there's life there thriving. I found that very cool. They talked about that on some of the Jovian worlds as well, how there'd be certain elevations where there's bands of breathable air, but if you go too low, there's too much pressure and just that sort of thing. I just guess more world building stuff with Dan Simmons. I just did that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sort of one of the schools of thought is that colonizing Mars is kind of a bad move when you could essentially go to Venus, where the surface of it would be inhabitable. Wow, I can't say it.
Uninhabitable?
Uninhabitable. Areas in the upper atmosphere would actually be quite plausible in terms of like temperature and pressure and all of that. So
Sure, exactly.
like you'd be able to go outside in those elevations with like a breathing apparatus, but no pressure suit or any, crazy stuff, apparently. But you would have to you'd have to settle in like dirigibles or something, you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, right. I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Venus either, but I'm not super surprised to hear that.
Kind of like how some of the Jupiter's moons and Saturn's moons might be more habitable than some of the other planets too. Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, anything else? Any other moments, Chad? Did you have any other?
Nah, man. I feel like
section?
I'm pretty pleased with the time we took on this. I think, we covered a lot of ground over the 4 episodes, and I really feel like we did justice to it. So I'm pleased. I'm stoked.
All right.
I'm whelmed.
All right. Well, being whelmed is good. Well, we don't have any nuggets unless you've mined some nuggets that I don't know about.
I got nothing. The Simmons family nugget was the only nugget worth mining.
Right on. We're not going to rate this. Everybody knows what we think of this because we're doing it in 4 shows.
2
that
thumbs
should be
up.
enough. We got a couple deaths though.
Definitely.
Everybody had a death. That was great. You requested an ejection on Stagnaceous.
Yeah, and I had a Matrix death.
Okay, the Matrix death, and then I didn't really count that.
That's all right.
And then you two had the Terminator death.
No, you two had the Terminator death.
Well, kind of both. Like you guys.
I didn't have a
Terminator death. Okay. And then I died on Terminator Hicks, talking about forgetting. Yeah.
You died on Hicks, and he died on T-1000.
I died there, and I died on T-1000.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Nope. That's it, brother.
Yay. Let's take some time before we get into another 4-book series.
Right?
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
It was worth doing, but man, that was a lot.
I still really enjoyed it. What do we got coming up next week?
Don't know, because this is an episode out of time.
Oh, right.
Is it the new Bill and Ted? Because that's what's next on the list.
No, New Bill and Ted's is next, but we mentioned it as the next show from, was it Beastmaster? Top 5. It'll follow Top 5.
Aha.
Okay, got it.
So this one isn't on the schedule yet, so we'll just slip in a what's next whenever we get to it.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I'm realizing now that I got confused because this one's been there for a while, and I've gone down to the next one every time when I was unsure, and so that's why I got confused. We're finally doing it, so.
Yeah, it has been on the list for ages.
It's been at the top of the list for a very long time. So my instinct is just to be like, what's the next thing? Okay, that's what we're doing. Yeah.
All right, goodbyes and outro.
Yeah. Folks, thanks for joining us, whether you read the books or listened to the audiobooks or didn't at all. Thanks for joining us on this journey for our first sort of foray into exploring what it would be to talk about a science fiction book instead of film or a comic book property or something like that. So thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode, folks. If you'd like to support the show, there's a couple great ways you can do that. You can rate us. You can review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It's very, very helpful. You can also tell a friend. You can also support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/EBD podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode in your podcast app of choice or at our website, ebd.fm/episodes/. As always, join us on social media. We are on most social medias using the handle @EBD Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this last book of our book club series, folks, and we'll see you next time.